to another episode of Epigram. Please check us on the Instagram channel right now. We are posting daily our construction of our Synesthesia installation that we did before in the Baltimore Light City Festival. This Friday and Saturday, we're going to be having an opening of the installation in the NextNOW in the University of Maryland. Today, we have David Fersh. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
We are talking to the future right here. So I'm very glad that you came and chat with us for a little bit. I'm so intrigued by these days how technology has been like tricking the architecture in a different path. I don't know. I feel like all the stuff that is happening with the virtual reality, augmented reality, all the plugins that are now for the programs that makes everything easier than before. I remember when I was studying architecture, there were a few people that were the experts on renderings. There were the few experts on certain digital programs. But now I feel the platforms finally are becoming more like connected. That if you work on Revit or you work on Rhino or blah, 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 there's some ways that plugins work with each other. And I don't know, tell me more a little bit about you, a little bit of your background.
So my background is I'm an architect at Smith Group. I work in our workplace studio, but I also help lead our National Technology and Practice group. So we've got this awesome group that focuses on all things technology related. So we sort of divide up into, we've got data and analytics that we look at, and we look at, what's the best way to take advantage of BIM, and we look at how we're using computational design to really make our designs better and make everything more efficient. And then I lead our visualization group, which is everything augmented and virtual reality or 3D printing, rendering software, all kinds of anything about how we're presenting our work and how we can improve our workflows. So.
That's awesome. Sorry to, in this week, past weekend, I was with my nephews, and I was quite impressed about this new generation of kids coming up. He's like 17 years old, but his first phone was an iPhone. For when they grew up already, the Facebook was something old. It felt like an old channel that my parents used to watch, and I don't watch that anymore. Their focus is so different, and I feel like it's very hard to understand where is the future of technology is taking us. Now in architecture, especially, like I find like I don't know which program should I focus on. Because maybe in the market, we're going to find something else in the next month that will be completely different. Like telling you, I think like about 2 weeks ago, I started using Enscape. Mm-hmm. Enscape is a rendering tool to visualize architecture. And I'm also impressed how quickly you can develop something without not too much coordination. Before you needed to coordinate materials, you need to put the bump on the grass, all that stuff to create something. Now you just like do it. And people that never have done rendering before, they're doing really good stuff. And Lumion was another one that I was around. Octane too, I saw it too. And there's like a bunch of different elements that are coming like that, I don't know which one to focus,
Yeah, I mean, I think the cool thing is that all of these tools are getting simpler and simpler to use, and they're taking advantage of all this data that we were already producing, right? So, yeah. I mean, I think the future is to be nimble, but they make it easy. So all those tools, you're modeling in Revit or SketchUp or Rhino or wherever you're doing your model work, and you're applying materials and you're putting things in 3D. And the really nice thing is they're just getting better and better at using the data that you're already making. So like for instance, Enscape is a fantastic tool that we're using all the time to view our Revit models, and it's actually starting to change the way we work in Revit, right? So like where we used to not care at all about materials or 3D appearances, all of a sudden we start to model a little bit more and add a little more detail to our material, and it's not necessarily huge changes as far as our workflow. The nice thing is it sort of fits within a workflow that we're already doing, and really gives us more and more value, which is exciting, I think.
Also think like I feel like technology goes in a certain speed, and we kind of like manage it, but we have a business that sometimes it's a model that we need to address and charge a client.
Yeah.
Before in contracts for different projects, we put like we're gonna have certain amount of views, and each view costs a certain amount of money, and that's how you put together a package of a contract to charge the client for your work. But now, every time technology becomes more efficient, that doesn't seem that the idea is that it's not completely easier, because you have to have a knowledge behind that. But those tools help you to design better. But how we as an architects, we become smart about these tools and how we charge it to our clients, because again, that becomes like, okay, before we only give you 3 views, but now we can do whatever view you want, or we can, I don't know, like I feel like it becomes tougher to really like quantify our value.
Yeah, it's an interesting question that I've heard several times now, but you know, how do you change what you're charging? How do you make more money off of it? But you know, it really is. I feel like it's very project specific in some ways. Depending on the team, you're sort of building that model anyway, depending on sort of the design quality that you're intending. And so, to me, if what you're building already, what we're using internally to study, is making our job easier, help us make decisions, we can share that information. And for me, if it's not additional work, you know, that's just, hey, we're getting better at our job, and we give you more value for what you're paying. You know, there's definitely a line, you know, where if you say, okay, we're gonna stop, we're gonna do like a photoreal rendering, we're gonna do a virtual reality walkthrough using Unreal Engine, or like one of these gaming engines where you stop and really are putting time and interoperability. I mean, that I think is a clear distinction. But I think the cool thing is starting to share some of our process so people understand it. And then the other thing is clients don't understand when we send them plans and sections and renderings all the time, right? Like some are more savvy than others. Some do it a lot. Some might be, you know, this is really the first project that they're doing of anything close to this scale. So if we can take them into virtual reality and walk them through their building, I mean, like, they understand that. And so when they see a room in virtual reality and they say, no, you know, this room is too small, it needs to be bigger, or, you know, this is too tight, or this ceiling is too low. And instead of doing a addendum or a CCD, we're catching it at an early stage. You know,
correct, yes.
We're not always getting an ad service for, you know, changing ceiling, you know, updating our detailing at a later stage. But, you know, if you catch 1 or 2 of those along the way, all of a sudden it's like, oh, it was worth it. You know, that was a smart move, both for us and for the client to get a better understanding.
So now that you brought the virtual reality, I know all these tools that we are using daily, we can do bidimensional renderings, 3D renderings, and now the virtual tours inside it could be static, and you can be in motion. You can walk through the project. What are the best tools you are seeing right now? Because I have used a few of them at my office, but in your take that you have been more inexperienced with that, I think Juli told me even there's opportunity to do augmented reality that I never had tried that yet. So you can explain about that a little bit more.
Yeah, well, I can maybe talk a little bit about like the suite of tools we use, I guess. So, I mean, as far as VR headsets, the hardware, we've had the most luck with the HTC Vive, you know, which just has really nice external sensors and does a really nice job of tracking you through space. And the other one we're playing around with is some of the Windows mixed reality headsets, which are pretty cool because instead of having external sensors, you need to mount them in the ceiling, right, and they track your movement. They actually track inside out, so they've got cameras mounted in the headset. They can sort of scan the space around you and do movements. So that's sort of cool as far as less setup to get it going. And we use a lot of Enscape, you know, just like you said, that's a fantastic tool for like a quick walkthrough. And there are lots of others out there as far as Iris VR is one, and I'm going to blank on a couple of the other names, but there's a bunch of other ones out there.
Let's talk about this, about like the fancy car and the base car. Like, what is the best for the buck? Because, for example, people that maybe see this, they're entrepreneurs. They have their own small company, and they want to give that technology to a client. But some companies like Smith Group, Gensler, big places, they can buy anything, you know, they need to as a tool. But there's...
So the expensive thing is not the headset. The expensive thing is the computer. So you need a nice computer with a good GPU. And if you look at like some of the Vive requirements, they'll tell you, you know, get a GTX 1080 or something. So the graphics card is what's expensive. But we're talking like entire setup, a couple $1,000s, which... you know, will last you, you know, that's like a good setup and you have it. So the Vive, I don't the retail price right now is something like $500. The Windows mixed reality headsets you can get a little cheaper. I think some of the there's 5 different ones. I think the lowest end ones are like coming in at a couple $100. So if you want to be a little bit more bargain conscious, you could look at like one of the lower end Windows mixed reality and get sort of a lower end computer that will run it nicely. And you could be in good shape to go. Then there's also all the cell phone viewers, right? So those are not.
That's what I have.
Yeah, sure. So we talk. So I think a good distinction is degrees of freedom when you talk about it. So when you talk about a cell phone viewer, usually like a Google Cardboard is the way most popular, but Samsung Gear or you know Google makes one that goes with the Pixel. Those take advantage of the gyroscope in the phone, and so it's 3 degrees of freedom, right? So you can like move your head, you can tilt up and down, and you can twist. But if you walk, you're still in that space, right? Which can be a little disorienting, actually, if you do it. And so 6 degrees of freedom is what we're talking about with these other headsets. The Vive and the Oculus Rift is the other big one.
And you don't think the phones will get there? They need too much power to render that, I guess.
So they need to somehow be able to scan the space around you and understand your movement, right? So I think in the future, you know, some of this augmented reality stuff you're seeing with the iPhone's AR kit, they're sort of starting to be able to scan the space around using the cameras, and they can sort of look and see objects and then sense the movement of that object. It's pretty amazing technology, and I think it's going to get better and better. And so maybe one day they'll be able to really sense your movement through space. Right now, it's not really there, but I mean, yeah, sure. Down the road, I don't see why not.
I asked myself the question. Now I see that at Hikoko, where I work, every day they use the VR more as a design tool.
Yeah.
They come as a group. Whoever are designing a space, they come there and just whatever they have been working all day in the Revit, they just come there and see how everything's feeling. You know, this feels good. This doesn't feel good. And I'm just asking myself, when is gonna be the day that you're sitting in your desk with one of these goggles, you know, like designing the work? I don't know.
People do that today. Yeah. They're gonna be today. Yeah. Sure, you get a Windows mixed reality headset, plug it into your computer, and you could just be sitting there. I've talked to people that say, we have a couple of these that we just have them at our desks. We have a couple of designers that work that way.
And they're all day in virtual reality.
They could just sit there and just, I mean, I think it would be a little bit much to be there all day. There aren't great apps yet to design within virtual reality, but there's some.
And why do you think is that? Why there's no good tools yet to design?
I think it's just a tough. It's a tough tool to create. And we're so used to working, you know, within sort of the computer interface with that precision. And but geez, I'm going to forget the name of the app. I got a chance to test one out where you are actually within a Rhino environment. And so you're drawing a line in 3D, and then you're drawing a second line, and then you're sweeping between them, right? Wow. So it's like any command you can do in Rhino, you can do in VR. And you know, the theory is, well, you can actually build much faster here because you're sort of doing it in real time. You have less clicks, and you're moving through. I don't know that we're really there yet, but you know, eventually.
I don't know if for car technology or stuff like that, because I know that for cars they still do clays. Scale in the 1-to-1 scale of a car in clay, and they're shaping it by hand, and they rescan them in 3D, and they go back to the computer, then they make it back clay. So I don't know if there's a way that in the future, when we are building our work, our models, we keep going back and forth. That would be awesome. I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out there. You see,
Yeah.
dreaming.
No, I mean, there's something amazing, though, about a physical object, too, that I think no matter how good virtual reality becomes, there's still always going to be a place for physical objects. I really strongly believe that. The tactility and sort of being around it and molding something by hand. Virtual reality is great, and you can't always build the thing, especially a building at full scale to mess around with. But at the scale of a car or a piece of furniture, you know, there's still something so amazing about having a true prototype.
And I saw the new one from Microsoft, and it's not that new anymore. I know that it was very pricey. That is kind of virtual reality, but you can actually see around you.
Yeah.
So it works with the augmented reality. That's the only headset that does that right now?
So there's a few out there. Hololens is one that we've been testing. It's definitely the most mature. I think it's been out since 2016. Another one just came out like a couple within the last month. Magic Leap is a similar technology to HoloLens that's got sort of that translucent lens that you can see through. And there are several others that are sort of out there in development stage.
But the software is very different for those, or you can actually use like Enscape, for example, in those?
So you can't, not Enscape. I mean, it's not super different. I mean, basically, you need to somehow upload a 3D model into the space. And so in HoloLens, typically you're exporting like an FBX file, which you can do right from Revit, and then placing it in reality. So the really cool thing about the HoloLens is it tracks, as you're walking around, it sort of scans the space around you, using sensors mounted in the headset itself. It's actually, the computer's actually in the headset. So you have total freedom to move, right? You're not corded to anything. And so you can place, and this concept to me is amazing, that you can basically place a digital model on top of reality, right? So anything that you have in the computer, you can sort of place in the real world, and as you walk that space, you have instant access to it. So all of this fantastic information that we're putting into our Revit models, or into a mechanical model, whatever that's out there, and it doesn't even have to be a Revit model. It could be any data, interesting traffic flow data, or whatever. And then to visualize it in 3D is pretty cool. So I really see huge possibilities. Right now we're doing some CA work with the HoloLens out at DC Water headquarters.
Wow, that has to be pretty cool.
So we've got this complicated paneling pattern on the facade, and it's a curvilinear building. So it's 4-foot segments, but they follow a curve around the whole thing. So there's no good way to sort of track the panel. So if I'm looking at a flat elevation and I try to figure out if that's the right panel or not, it's pretty hard. I can sort of pick one spot and I can start to count over, But if I place a model on top of it and I've got 3-dimensional tags, I can all of a sudden see, okay, that's the right panel, that's the right panel, that's the right panel, without sort of this manual checking to some degree. There's still a manual use to it, but it's it's much more accurate and easy to do.
That's awesome. So yeah, and now that you were talking about those augmented reality models, I know that there's other technology that we have been talking about, digital elements, but we know that also there's really good 3D printers that are getting every day more and more involved with the construction and other aspects. But I think something that worries me, because I remember when I was in school, there was always a challenge between the good architect that drew by hand, and then they were scared that technology would take that away. And somehow, people don't sketch that much too, in regular basis, the new generation, because they can conceptualize in the computer. It becomes very easy. Do you think maybe there's a track where having this augmented reality will eliminate the physical models at work? I don't know. I don't want that, but I see that technology is taking us somewhere there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to our conversation about, something about tactility of a real object is, I think, still really important. Yeah. And even the idea that, people don't sketch before they hop in the computer. I think that, I mean, and I'm guilty of this too. You know, it can be problematic because what you do is you go to what you know how to do and have done before, and instead of telling you know, whatever software you're using what you want it to do, you're doing what's sort of easiest to do within that software. So I still think like it's important to sketch out your thoughts to some degree, whether that's, you know, that could be a digital sketch to some degree, but that thought process I think is really important. And then as far as objects, I mean, yeah, I don't think, I mean, because what we do is we create physical objects, right, to some degree, whether it be a building or it be a piece of furniture or a handrail. And in the end, that's the final product. And the digital representation is great. And it can be very helpful, especially when you're talking large scale. But when you get down to it, there's always going to be something about touching and understanding what that feels like. That I don't think the virtual world will ever take over. So I certainly hope that people don't lose sight of that. You know, and I don't think the industry will. It's always going to have to be there. You know, maybe we're a little more strategic about when we're using those things. But I think it's vital. I mean, it has to stay.
Maybe we do like a Frankenstein. We do like we fix something in the model and then we make the options digital. I don't know.
Yeah,
like, we can do.
Well, I mean, you see that kind of thing in like museum displays now. You'll see augmented reality, over at what's the museum? The Newseum. They have a piece of the Berlin Wall, and then you have sort of a virtual reality experience next to the Berlin Wall. You know, so it's that kind of like, okay, here's a real piece, and here's some. Let's add to your imagination on it.
That'll be great. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. I just want to like, maybe we went for a while talking. There's anything that you want to close with? I know that you're engaged with this in technology and you talk to people and you see this every day. If there's like we can take this knowledge and somehow be so smart in the way we use it. I don't know. Imagine you trying to explain people how to use this technology at work. Sometimes it's quite challenging because there's people that usually have the certain way of thinking stuff, and they think they know more than anybody. So I don't know. Maybe this is a complex question that doesn't make any sense, but I want to close with something that you can tell about your experience in dealing with this in your daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, it is a little bit complex, but in the end, I think you're just looking for the best way to do your job. So like, people, you know, I tend to have gone down this. I've done a lot of work lately with virtual and augmented reality, and so, you know, people are like, oh, you're the VR guy. It's like, I'm really not a big VR guy. I don't go home and play VR video games. Like, I'm not that into it, but I think it's perfect for our job, right? Like, we're visualizing this 3D space, so I'm like, why isn't everybody using this? This makes sense for our work. So, I mean, I think, you know, that can be said for a lot of different things. You know, it can be said for writing a simple script that automates really repetitive tasks. You know, it's like, well, why are we doing this? I think as long as people think, I think the best advice I could give is think for a minute. Don't just take what's given to you for granted and say, this is the way we do it. You know, it's like, well, I know there's a better way. We should be doing it this way. Or I think this can be much more efficient. Like, let's give it a try. I think that's the best way to do it. And people, hopefully the people you work with are responsive to that. And if they're not, you know, that's sort of their problem also. You know, it's like, fine, you're going to get left behind. So I think it's good.
Cool, David. So thank you so much for this conversation. It blew my mind, actually. And yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I'm going to put in the links below, all information about the technology we talk about. So I'm going to put a few links. I can put some information from you too. And please tune us for the next episode next week. Thank you, guys. Bye. Thanks.